My name is Bella, I am 25 years old, and if you had met me at the beginning of last year, you would have thought my life was charmed. I was the youngest daughter in a well-respected family, known in our town for our wealth, our connections, and our picture-perfect image. My father was a businessman with TIs in real estate, my mother the socialite who organized charity galas, and I was the daughter who played the role expected of me, polite, smiling, never questioning, always appearing grateful. But what outsiders never knew, what even close friends couldn't guess, was that beneath the polished exterior, my family treated me like an afterthought. It had started years ago, subtle at first. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child. My parents poured everything into him, their pride, their resources, their affection. My older sister, Claire, was the beauty and the charm, the one paraded at social functions. And me? I was the quiet one, the one told to be supportive, the one reminded constantly how lucky I was to be part of the family name. At dinners, my accomplishments were dismissed as trivial compared to Daniel Steele's or Claire's admirers. At family gatherings, I was asked to help in the kitchen while Claire posed for photos, but I endured it, telling myself that families were complicated, that one day my parents would see me for who I was. That illusion shattered the night of the family party. It was supposed to be a reunion, the kind of lavish event my mother adored, with crystal chandeliers, waiters in white gloves, and music filling the ballroom. Relatives from across the country were invited. Old friends of my father's flew in from New York. The entire community buzzed about it. I received no invitation, but I assumed it was an oversight. After all, why would I not be invited to my own family's celebration? I dressed carefully in a simple but elegant black dress, did my hair in loose waves, and arrived at the mansion ready to blend into the festivities. But the moment I stepped into the foyer, my mother's face froze. My father, standing beside her, looked me up and down and said flatly, "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." The words hit like a slap. Conversations around us paused. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me. My throat closed, my heart pounding so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. "But I'm your daughter," I whispered, as if reminding them of a fact they had simply forgotten. My mother's smile was cold. "Bella, this is an important event. We didn't want distractions." That was what I was to them. Not a daughter, not family. A distraction. I turned and walked out before anyone could see the tears welling in my eyes. Outside, the night air was sharp and cruel. The laughter and music inside the house mocked me, every note a reminder that I was unwanted. I drove away. With shaking hands, my vision blurred, fury building inside me like a storm. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I swore I would never again beg for their acceptance. If they thought I was a distraction, then I would become the disruption they could never ignore. Revenge did not bloom overnight. It was a seed planted in humiliation, watered with every memory of their dismissals, and it grew quietly, steadily, until it consumed my every thought. I began watching them more closely, paying attention to the cracks in their perfect image. My father's business, though celebrated, was riddled with debts he carefully concealed. My mother's charities often skimmed funds for her personal indulgences. Daniel's deals were not all legal, and Claire's glittering reputation hid affairs and betrayals of her own. For years, I had been invisible, but invisibility had its advantages. No one noticed when I lingered near conversations, when I checked the drawers they left unlocked, when I copied documents under the guise of helping. Piece by piece, I collected evidence. Bank statements, emails, contracts, photographs, secrets they thought buried beneath layers of charm and wealth. My anger gave me patience, and my patience gave me power. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I attended smaller gatherings, smiled politely, accepted their lukewarm greetings. Inside, I was coiling tighter and tighter, waiting for the moment to strike. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Daniel boasted one evening about a major real estate deal. He was about to close a deal that, if successful, would cement his place as my father's heir apparent. I knew, from the documents I had seen, that the deal was built on lies. Properties overvalued, investors misled, illegal shortcuts taken. It was the kind of scandal that could ruin reputations, bankrupt companies, and even invite legal consequences. I bided my time. I waited until the night of another family event, smaller than the reunion but still brimming with important guests. This time, I was invited perhaps out of obligation, perhaps because my parents assumed I had learned my place. I dressed in deep red, the color of blood and defiance, and carried with me a folder that could shatter their perfect faud. Dinner was lavish, the kind of meal where every course was designed to impress. My father raised a glass to toast Daniel's brilliance, praising his soon-to-be closed deal. Applause filled the room, and that was when I stood. Before we toast, I said, my voice calm but carrying through the hall, I think our guests deserve the full picture of what they're celebrating. The room quieted. Eyes turned to me, puzzled, curious. My parents' smiles faltered. Daniel's jaw tightened. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the folder and began laying out papers on the table. Contracts with falsified numbers, emails boasting of cutting corners, photographs of meetings that were never meant to be seen. Gasps rippled through the room. Whispers followed. Daniel stammered, reaching for the papers, but I pulled them back. These are only copies, I said coolly. The originals are already in the hands of those who will know what to do with them. My father's face turned crimson. My mother's hand clutched her pearls. Claire stared at me as if seeing me. For the first time, I may have been uninvited from your party, I continued, my voice steady, but I will not be erased from the truth. This family built its image on lies, and tonight, those lies end. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, guests began to rise, murmuring excuses, leaving the table. By the end of the night, the room was nearly empty. My family, left staring at me with a mixture of rage and horror. That was only the beginning. In the days following that dinner, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Some calls were from relatives, shocked and appalled, wanting to know how I could humiliate the family like that. Others were from acquaintances and distant family friends, their voices low, telling me they admired my courage, that they had suspected things but never had proof. I ignored most of them. I hadn't done it for their praise or their judgment. I had done it for me, for the years of silence I had swallowed, for the humiliation of being told to my face I wasn't wanted. My father didn't come home for 2 nights after the scandal broke. My mother called me once, her voice shrill with rage. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed us, Bella. You've destroyed your brother's future. You've made us a laughingstock. I held the phone to my ear, calm as steel. No, Mother. You destroyed yourselves the moment you built your world on lies. I just opened the curtains so everyone could see what was already there, the line. When dead, her silence louder than any curse, but exposing Daniel was only one piece of my plan. My family had reduced me to a ghost, but ghosts see things the living overlook. Over the years, I had witnessed too much, tucked away too many secrets. Now, for the first time, I realized I could turn those secrets into power. Claire, for example, was worshipped for her beauty, her charm, her image as the flawless daughter. But I knew about the affair she had been carrying on with one of Father's married business partners. I had the texts she foolishly sent, the hotel receipts she left behind. It wasn't my intention to ruin her, not yet, but the knowledge sat like a dagger in my back pocket, and my mother, the queen of charity galas, loved to remind the world of her generosity. But I had receipts of funds diverted from her children's literacy initiative into her private accounts, money spent on jewelry and vacations. She wore her pearls like armor, but I had the means to shatter them. I waited. Patience was the art I had mastered. Meanwhile, Daniel floundered. His deal collapsed, investors pulled out, whispers of fraud began circulating in the business press. He stormed into my apartment once, uninvited, his eyes wild. You think you've won? You think you're clever? You've destroyed me, Bella. You've destroyed everything. I stood my ground. No, Daniel. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to cover for you. He lunged as if to strike me, but stopped short, his hand trembling in the air. For a moment, I saw the truth. He wasn't furious at me. He was terrified. Without my father's empire to shield him, he was nothing but a coward propped up by lies. He left, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I didn't see him for months after that, but the house of cards still stood fragile, wobbling but upright. My parents clung to their pride. Claire continued to smile for cameras. My father tried to salvage his business. And so, I began phase 2. I chose my moment carefully. The annual charity gala. It was my mother's crown jewel, the night she glittered brightest, when society's elite applauded her supposed benevolence. This year, despite the whispers, she insisted the show would go on. I received no invitation, of course, but I didn't need one. Dressed in a gown of midnight blue, with a flash drive hidden in my clutch, I slipped into the event as a guest of a friend. The ballroom shimmered with light, champagne flowed, music swelled. My mother stood at the podium, radiant, thanking donors for their contributions. Cameras flashed as she gestured gracefully toward a screen where images of children reading filled the background. And then, the images changed, not by her hand, but by mine. The screen flickered, and suddenly bank statements appeared, projected, larger than life. Transfers from charity accounts to my mother's personal ones. Jewelry purchases, hotel stays, spa treatments. Murmurs turned to gasps, gasps to shouts. My mother froze, her lips parting in horror. I stepped forward, voice calm, steady, amplified by the microphone I seized from the nearest stand. My mother has raised millions in the name of children's literacy. But here is where your donations have gone. To her pearls, her vacations, her luxuries. This is not generosity. This is theft dressed in silk. The room erupted. Donors surged. To the exits, reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras turned away from my mother's carefully curated smile to capture the truth splashed across the screen. My father tried to cut the power, but it was too late. The damage was done. I left before the police arrived, before the board members of the charity called for an investigation, before my mother's name made the headlines for all the wrong reasons. I didn't need to see the fallout. I had lived in their shadow long enough. Now, I wanted to live in their ruin. Claire was next. She was more cautious after what happened to Daniel and my mother. She kept her head down, avoided scandal, smiled politely at events. But her secret was too tempting, too poisonous to keep hidden. I released it quietly. A packet delivered to the wife of the man she had been sleeping with. Screenshots of messages, receipts from hotels. I didn't sign my name, didn't leave a trace, but I didn't need to. The truth was enough. Within weeks, whispers turned into tabloids, tabloids into a scandal that scorched her perfect image. She disappeared from social life, her face no longer the darling of the society pages. One by one, I had stripped them bare, but revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about transformation. And as I watched the empire crumble, my father's business failing under scrutiny, my mother indicted for fraud, Daniel blacklisted, Claire disgraced, I realized I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed their love. What I had built was something more powerful. Respect. Not theirs, but my own. Still, justice demanded a final act. I returned to the mansion one last time, not as a guest, not as a daughter seeking a place, but as a storm come home. The house was quieter now, fewer staff, fewer lights. My parents sat in the parlor, weary, aged in a matter of months. They looked at me with a mixture of hatred and resignation. You've destroyed us, my father rasped. No, I said softly. I've freed myself. I placed a stack of documents on the table, proof of every crime, every fraud, every betrayal I had uncovered. The authorities will take it from here. I don't need to watch. I don't need to be part of this family anymore. I just needed you to know that the daughter you called a distraction was the one who ended it all. I turned and walked away, the echo of my heels on marble the only sound. Outside, the air was cool, the sky streaked with stars. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alive. My family had cast me out, humiliated me, tried to erase me, but I had written myself back into the story not as their daughter, not as their victim, but as their reckoning, and I promised myself, as I drove away from the mansion that night, that I would never again shrink to fit into someone else's shadow. I was Bella, I was 25, and I was free. Freedom was intoxicating, but it was also disorienting. For 25 years, my life had revolved around the gravitational pull of my family, their approval, their demands, their suffocating expectations. Now, for the first time, I was drifting, free of their orbit. Some mornings I woke exhilarated, ready to embrace the day as my own. Other mornings I woke haunted by echoes of their voices, by the weight of old doubts whispering, "What if you've gone too far? What if you've destroyed yourself along with them?" But as weeks turned into months, those whispers grew fainter, drowned out by the steady rhythm of a life I was finally building for myself. I moved into a new apartment, far from the shadow of the mansion where my family's empire had stood. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I filled it with plants, books, and light, all the things I'd once been told were frivolous. I started running in the mornings, the air crisp and alive against my skin. Every step felt like a declaration. I was no longer running from them. I was running toward myself. Of course, the world didn't let me forget them entirely. Their names were still in the papers, though no longer celebrated. My father's company collapsed under the weight of investigations. My mother was convicted of fraud, her pearls now evidence in a courtroom instead of ornaments at a gala. Daniel vanished, rumored to be hiding abroad, too disgraced to show his face. Claire tried to rebuild her image, but scandal clung to her like smoke, and every interview she gave only reminded people of what she'd lost. People began to approach me differently. At work, colleagues who had once overlooked me now sought my input, impressed by my quiet resilience. Strangers online reached out after reading the essays I had begun publishing under a pseudonym, reflections on betrayal, survival, and the strange power of reclaiming your story. Writing had become my therapy, my way of weaving pain into meaning. One essay in particular, about the night I was told I wasn't invited to my own family's party, spread quickly. It wasn't filled with names or scandalous details, just raw emotion and the reminder that sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you deepest. Messages poured in from readers who said they felt seen, that my words gave them courage to walk away from toxic families, partners, and friends. That was when I realized my revenge had rippled outward. It wasn't just my justice, it was a spark for others too, but justice, I learned, is a hungry thing. It doesn't end neatly. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I saw a familiar figure waiting by the steps of my building. Daniel. His hair was longer, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the golden boy who had once been my father's pride. He looked hollow. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. Every instinct screamed to turn away, but I stood still. "About what?" "How I ruined your life." His laugh was bitter. "You think you ruined me?" "No, Bella, I ruined myself. You just pulled back the curtain." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They're done. Mom, Dad, Claire, the empire's gone. But you and me, we're still here. We're blood. We can rebuild something." I stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "Rebuild? With you? After everything? Think about it," he pressed. "You're smart. Smarter than I gave you credit for. You know how to play the game. We could make a fortune together." I shook my head slowly. "Daniel, you still don't get it. I don't want a fortune. I don't want power built on lies. I don't want anything with you." His face darkened. For a moment, I thought he might lash out, but instead he just spat on the ground and muttered, You'll regret this." Then he walked away, his shoulders hunched, swallowed by the night. I didn't see him again, but his words lingered. Would I regret it? Had I unleashed something darker in him, something that would come back for me? Months later, I found out the answer in the news. Daniel had been arrested overseas, caught in a scheme so reckless it made his earlier fraud look like child's play. I read the article twice, my coffee growing cold in my hands, and then I closed the paper and let out a long breath. Whatever regret I'd feared evaporated. He had sealed his fate, just as the rest of them had. For the first time, I felt safe, truly safe, but safety doesn't erase scars. I began therapy, something I had once thought of as weakness. Sitting in that small, sunlit office, I unpacked years of pain I hadn't realized I carried. I cried for the girl who had begged for scraps of love, for the young woman humiliated at the door of her own home. I grieved for the family I had wished for but never had, and slowly, I began to forgive not them, but myself. Forgive myself for staying too long, for trying too hard, for believing too much, and with forgiveness came clarity. My revenge had been necessary, but it wasn't my purpose. It had been the fire that burned down the old house. Now, it was time to build a new one. I leaned deeper into writing. My essays turned into a manuscript, and eventually into a book. When it was published, it found readers around the world. Letters arrived from people telling me how my words gave them the strength to confront their own betrayals, to demand justice, to walk away from those who treated them as less than human. My story was no longer just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they were unwanted. The night of my first book signing, I stood before a crowd of strangers who knew me more intimately than my family ever had. They applauded, they asked questions, they shared their own stories, and in their faces, I saw something I had never seen at those glittering family parties: genuine respect, genuine love. I realized then that revenge hadn't just freed me from my family, it had delivered me to myself. I walked home that night under a sky filled with stars, the city alive around me, and I felt a peace so deep it startled me. For years, I had defined myself by what I wasn't: not the favorite child, not the chosen one, not the one invited. But now, I was something else entirely. I was Bella. I was 25, and I was more than enough. After the book was released, life felt like it had entered an entirely new chapter. For so long, I had been a ghost in my own family's home, unseen and unheard, but now people stopped me on the street to tell me how my words touched them. My inbox overflowed with messages from people who had survived betrayals of their own children cast aside by parents, partners abandoned by those they trusted, employees betrayed by bosses they had sacrificed for. Each story was a mirror, each confession a reminder that I had not been alone. My pain had simply been one note in a symphony of betrayal and resilience, and by sharing it, I had helped others find their own voices, but with recognition came unease. Fame, however small, can attract shadows. I began noticing strange messages online, some anonymous, some eerily familiar. "You'll pay for what you did. Blood always calls you back. You can't erase where you came from." At first, I dismissed them as the noise of strangers emboldened by screens, but one message stopped me cold. "I'll be at your next signing. You won't see me, but I'll see you." The words carried the echo of Daniel's last threat. Could it be him, from prison, or someone acting in his name? I told my publisher, who insisted on hiring security for the events. For weeks, I scanned every face in the crowd, searching for danger. But no one ever appeared, and eventually the threats tapered off. Still, they left a residue, a reminder that vengeance always casts long shadows. Justice unleashed is not something you can tuck neatly back into a box, and yet I refused to be afraid. I had spent enough of my life shrinking to fit inside cages built by others. If shadows followed me, so be it. I would stand in the light anyway. Years passed. My family's name became synonymous with disgrace. My father died quietly, his empire in ruins, his obituary a muted summary of failures. My mother faded into obscurity after serving her sentence, her once glittering friends gone. Claire married a minor politician and tried to claw back her reputation, but it never reached its former heights. And Daniel, he stayed locked away, a tragic figure who had once been destined for greatness but had gambled it all on lies. I did not attend my father's funeral. I was invited, in the most formal, grudging way, but I knew better than to walk back into that mausoleum of hypocrisy. Instead, I lit a candle alone in my apartment and whispered goodbye, not to the man he was, but to the hope I had once clung to that he might love me as I deserved. It was then, standing in the glow of that single candle, that I realized the final piece of my revenge had already unfolded. It wasn't in the downfall of their wealth or the exposure of their lies. It wasn't even in the book I had written or the people I had reached. It was in the fact that I had become whole without them. They had wanted me gone, erased, uninvited. And in erasing me, they had freed me to write myself anew. One day, a letter arrived from a reader that changed everything. It was from a young woman named Anna who lived halfway across the world. She wrote, "I read your story, and I finally found the courage to leave a family that treated me like a burden. I packed my bags and left last night. I don't know where I'm going, but for the first time, I feel free. Thank you for giving me that strength." Tears blurred my vision as I held the letter. That was the moment I understood the true scope of my journey. Revenge had started with rage, with a desire to make my family pay, but it had become something larger, something that stretched beyond me. My justice had become a lantern for others, lighting paths I would never walk, helping strangers I would never meet. And so, I kept writing, not to relive the past, but to carve out the future. Each book, each essay, each conversation was another act of defiance, another declaration that I was more than the sum of what my family had done to me. I built a life not on the ashes of theirs, but on the foundation of my own truth. Looking back now, I see the girl I once was, the 25-year-old who stood in her parents' foyer, told she wasn't invited, humiliated before a crowd. I see her walking out into the night, heartbroken, rage blooming in her chest. I wish I could reach through time and whisper in her ear, "Hold on, this pain will forge you into something unstoppable. One day, you will not just survive this. You will rise above it." And I did. I am Bella. I am the daughter they tried to erase, the distraction they dismissed, the ghost they thought would vanish. But I am also the reckoning they never saw coming. My story is not one of tragedy. It is one of transformation, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Sometimes, being uninvited is the greatest invitation of all the invitation. To step out of the shadows, to stop waiting for permission, and to write your own destiny, that is the justice I found. That is the revenge I claimed. And that is the life I will never again surrender.